Excuse me.
Good evening. The specific purpose of my speech this evening will be to persuade you, my audience, that there is no benefit from remaining in an abusive relationship. Now, I'm going to be speaking from the point of view of a person who has lost their life to domestic violence, also known as domestic abuse. It started out as just emotional abuse and quickly turned into physical abuse. I kept thinking that maybe I just did something to make him angry. But then it started to seem like I was making him angry more and more each and every day. There were the I love yous, I'm sorry, I apologize, I won't do it again. Until finally the I love yous turned into I love you to death. Now, aside from the surveys taken from the Silent Witness National Initiative, I will also be giving you information from sources such as domesticviolence.org, the American Psychic Association, and the USDA Domestic Violence Awareness Handbook. Now, according to the Silent Witness National Initiative, by the mid-1900s, 1,500 women each year were victims of murder due to domestic violence. The National Violence Against Women survey has said that 22% of women will be abused by their partner in their lifetime. This means that nearly 5.3 million partner abuse situations occur every year among women and men from ages 18 and up, which results in 2 million injuries, and 3% of male homicide victims are results of domestic violence from either former girlfriends, wives, or ex-wives, and 30% of female victims are also homicide victims are also victims of domestic violence from either former boyfriends, husbands, or ex-husbands. So I would like to talk to you about domestic violence or abuse. First, I'm going to tell you what can be considered abuse, then I'm going to give you reasons for getting out of that abusive relationship, and finally I'm going to ask that you all please remain aware of the possible consequences of staying in an abusive relationship if you ever end up in this situation. So first, what can be considered domestic violence or abuse? Well, domestic violence is behavior used by one person in a relationship to control another person. It can come in the forms of emotional abuse. There's also isolation, which is where you're isolated from family and friends, usually because of a jealousy situation. And then there's also intimidation and threatening, which is a form of domestic violence. And finally, a very common method, physical abuse, which eventually can and 30% of the time does lead to death. So far you see that abuse can come in many forms. That brings me to the next question. What are some very good reasons to get out of those abusive relationships? Abusive relationships can cause depression, it can cause anxiety, it can cause substance abuse, and even post-traumatic disorder. Aside from that, if there are children involved in the situation or witnessing the situation, then it is shown that 74% of children coming from domestic violence homes usually end up leading a life of crime. Aside from that, children can suffer as far as in their classwork. They can also suffer from stress, and they can really be affected by witnessing or being a part of a domestic violence relationship. So for anyone in the room who has children, I know you would not want that to be the case if it were your child. It could have a lot of consequences, not just for you, but for your child and those around you. So, in conclusion, I can't bring myself back from the dead to have a do-over. What's important though is that you know now what can happen if something isn't done, and I'm hoping that if any of you are put in this situation, that you will seek help in getting out. And even if you just know someone who's in a situation, that you will again seek help for them or give them ways to get out of their situation before it is too late. I ended up being a part of the 1,500 women that lost their lives due to domestic violence. Please don't become a statistic.